say to mean Bowers game.
Boy there, YouTube. We're back again for another How to Play video, and this is going to be How to Play Forsaken from Trayz Lab, a tabletop game experience by Travis Chance. And we have Travis Chance, the designer himself, who's going to do the teach.
How's it going?
Good.
So, we're going to talk about Forsaken. So, Forsaken is an open-world sandbox game set in a sci-fi, Western, crazy situation. The theme of the game is this planet Thyrria and its 2 moons were colonized for its resources and then summarily strip mined. The government that did this, one day all the colonists wake up and they look to the sky and all the siege ships are just leaving. So they've been, quote, forsaken, right? So they've been left. However, your characters are people who have come to this god-awful place to seek adventure, fortune, self-discovery, whatever. And each character is on a very different journey throughout the game. If you ever played a game like Western Legends, this game is similar in so much that you have actions, you move around, and you interact with things on the board. What's different about this game is it has, just the base game has 130,000 word storybook, just story text. It's got 3 different distinct planets. It's got, each of these planets has an encounter deck that has its own ecology, its own characters, its own politics, its own rewards, very different feelings, and you travel between these. And the cool thing about the game, which I'm going to throw in, this isn't anything about the rules, is this is Trayz's first published game that they're producing themselves. Trayz has helped 170 games over the last few years, many of which are very popular, big earners on Kickstarter, and this is Trayz going out on their own to do their own thing, and I'm super stoked to be a part of that. So I'm going to give you an idea of how the rules work. So you're going to be a character, and your character is going to have this little dashboard, a tray in front of it. Your character is going to have a starting loadout that's unique to it. You're going to have some unique powers. You're going to have the starting hand of cards, some of which are unique, because your experience is going to be unique. The goal of the game, believe it or not, is to have the most victory points. What a crazy concept. But how you're going to do that is what's going to shape your experience in the game and your story in the game. And everybody's stories are going to kind of come together, and the worlds themselves are also going to tell a story. And you're going to live inside that story while you're living out your story, and other people's stories are bumping up against yours. Okay? So at the start of your turn, if you're next to one of these purple pylon locations, you got to get back all your gear cards. And your gear cards are these cards with a blue banner. Gear cards are in your hand. You play them to do something. Everybody starts with an Omni kit, and an Omni kit just says if you roll dice, roll 1 extra die. And then you have a unique signature gear, okay? So that's the very first thing that'll happen. You'll get your stuff back. That's the only way to get your stuff back unless an effect says otherwise. After that, the world is your oyster. You've got 3 actions that you can spend, and there's a lot of things that you can do with those. One of the main things you're going to do in this game, as with most sandbox games, is you're going to move around the map. A space is denoted by a blue border. Locations aren't actually spaces. They sit on the adjacent to spaces. So if you're in this space, you're actually at the Sanction headquarters. Some spaces also have landmarks, and landmarks don't mean anything unless they do, if that makes any sense. Things will tell you to go there, or this landmark does this thing now, a new rule will get added to the game. So you're gonna move around the game. You're gonna move around the board because you need to move around to do things. Another thing you're gonna do is you're gonna interact with locations.
Yeah.
So you're gonna move around a lot in the game. One of the other things you're gonna want to do is you're going to gather resources. There are 4 scrap yards in the game. If you're adjacent to a scrap yard, you'll scrounge. How you scrounge is you'll roll dice equal to the value at that scrap yard. The starting ones are all 2. I'm going to come back to dice later, but if I did that, I would scrounge. I'll roll 2 dice. I'll get the resources equal to the value, and again, I'll come back to this. And then afterwards, this scrapyard token moves to the scrapyard that doesn't currently have a token. That way, players cannot spam. So this moves it around. The opportunity moves around also.
No worries.
What do you need resources for? Well, you're going to want to buy stuff. And there's a market of cards up here. And what's neat about this market of cards is you don't just go to one place and buy the stuff you want. There's different locations that allow you to buy different cards. And some of those locations, actually, your money is worth more than it should be normally. So the blue cards, as I said, are gear. You can buy gear cards at the black market. And when you buy things, you're going to spend resources. Resources come in two varieties. There's gray scrap tokens, and there's yellow particle tokens. Grays are worth 1, yellows are worth 2. However, at the black market, yellows are worth 3. So you can only buy one card, one blue card, but your yellow resources are worth more money there. So it's like a textured economy. Over here, we have the armory, and it's like the black market, but for orange cards. Orange cards are weapons, and I'll come back to those later. Okay? So, and again, your yellow resources are worth more here. The bazaar on the main planet, Thyrria, you can buy yellow or orange or blue cards, but your yellows are only worth 2. You can buy any number of cards that you can afford in any combination. Okay? And then the last place is these purple cards are called data cards. You can buy those at an uplink. Data cards you buy, they're very cheap. They go away. You can get 2 of them. So ideally, you'll wait till there's a couple out, and then you'll pay a very low amount, and you'll get gains off of that. Another thing that you're going to want to do in this game is you're going to want to do jobs, and I'm going to come back to that. But when you do a job, you're going to get reputation in a faction. When you have reputation in a faction, you get to go to their headquarters, and you get to spend that reputation to get special cards. And over here we have the faction tray. There's going to be a representative for each of the factions called a persona. So this little standee that's out is this character. So for this game, All Sister Nanari is the Ebony persona. Omen is the cartel persona. So there's modularity there. How the personas work is the top on each persona is the same. Every person in this faction gives you an orange vision token. Every person in this faction lets you pull 2 resources from the bag. What's unique about them is the bottom, you can pay them to do something else. So I can pay a yellow resource to gain a reputation in this faction and in another faction. And then I can move to any space on this blue planet. This guy will come pick me up, okay? So this adds some variety to the game. When I get a job card, I'm going to go over here. I'm going to pull one of these cards. If I don't like it, I can throw it back and I have to take the next one. But here, this is telling me I can take a special action at this specific location and do a thing. If I do that, I complete the job for that faction. When I get a job, I plop it down in the space for whichever faction I took it for, right? So I could get this job for any faction depending on which persona I talk to. When I complete a job, I'm going to get legend, and I'll come back to that, and I'm going to get rep. When I go with rep, I spin rep at the headquarters, and I basically get to get their spoils. So you'll pull out these really super powerful cards. You know, your starting weapon rolls 3 dice. This thing rolls 6 dice, and it has a power, right? So this gives you access to really powerful stuff, and you get a victory point. So that's what the headquarters do. There's also a couple other things. You can gamble at the cantina, which is a way to get cards for free instead of paying for them, but it's tough to do. If you do it, you also get legend. You can go to the ruins over here, and the ruins are effectively, you're going into the jungle. This planet is like this planet that's been overtaken by fungus, so it's like a fungal jungle. And if you spend a transponder token, a purple token, then you can go here, you'll draw one of these cards, and the rewards are crazy. You just don't know what you're going to get. So it's like a mystery prize, if you will. And that's pretty much all the locations that are on the game. Except there's another way you can actually move. You can pay 2 resources if you're standing next to the transport hub to move to any landmark, any of the icon vector spaces, okay? If you're at a landmark, you can pay 1 resource to move to the landing pad at the transport hub. Space Uber, right? So this is a way that if you have money, you can move around the map very quickly, but it's expensive to do so. And that's the locations. As I mentioned, you can connect with the personas. The personas will give you jobs and let you get a little bonus, or you can spend that. If you have a requisite number of what that bonus is, you can spend it for an ability also. So The last and most exciting action is to rest. And all rest means is you gain 2 vitality back and you gain a blue boost token. A boost token just means you spend this and it's a free move action. Okay? So, after you're done taking your turn, you'll then have an encounter, depending on where you are. So here we see this character is sitting next to this blue encounter space. They're going to draw this card, and it's going to tell them what to do. Okay? So here is the procession. If I was standing next to a red, I would have the awakening. I will read this card, and it's going to have a story, and then it's going to tell me, it's going to give me some options. This particular option says that the players are going to vote on what they want to do. Do they want to be involved in this funeral for this famous person, or do they want to protest the funeral because the person was kind of an infamous person that had some questionable values, right? And then depending on what the majority votes on, a different outcome is going to happen. The player to the right of the person who reads the card is going to the storybook. So, for example, if you want, I'll read you.
Yeah,
this.
let's do it.
So this is called the procession. A vine-choked Imperiad installment converted to a holy site by the Ebon Eye is host to the funeral of Blood Mother Hozep. A visionary, even among her people, Hozep was a controversial proponent of what she called the change, a voluntary genetic reconditioning to remove the Imperiad's alterations to the Ebon Eye and snuff out their ability to see the future. Before her death, she proclaimed that the change could come to pass if her remains were carried by non-believers to the ruins, but protests rage. Each player on the Mysoid Verge, so in this case it would be these 2 players, votes on an option below. Do you want to become a pallbearer, or do you want to protest the right? And so we would thumbs up, thumbs down at the same time. And then we would read entry M19A in the storybook. So let's just say you and I were playing. Let's say we both said become a pallbearer.
Absolutely.
Okay. It says Blood Mother Hozep's remains are carried by non-believers to their final resting place, despite widespread protest. As Hozep's genetic material is joined with the fungalite, the nearby mysoid sacs burst with pink spores that scatter to the winds. So each player that does this gains a legend. We heal all damage. If the active player became a pallbearer, they just get to gain a spoils just off the top of the deck.
Nice.
So that's a lot of work normally to get that outcome. All players that voted to protest it become infected with fungalite, which is like this virulent disease. So that would go and it would lower your hit points. And this is another texture thing. So this just means your hit points are lowered, but there's actually things in the game, including a character, that make that do all kinds of crazy other stuff. It could be a benefit in some games. It could be a further detriment in other games. So that's how the encounters work. Another thing that you can do as an encounter is you can encounter another player and fight them. The only reason you would want to do this is if a player has a thing called infamy. Infamy in and of itself does nothing positive for a player. It just means that if someone fights them and beats them, that player gets legend equal to their infamy. But there are cards that get more powerful the more infamy you have. So if you happen upon one of those cards, you might start wanting to become more and more infamous, even though you become a target, which is like this risk versus reward, and it kind of induces players to interact with each other in a combative manner. So that's like the basic turn structure. So I'm going to go into a few of the intricacies on the players, and then we'll be done. So each player has these cards. They also have a thing called a weapon. How weapons work is they tell you an amount of dice they have, and they have an ability. However, as you buy new weapons, you can take your old weapons and turn them into modifications.
Oh.
So now this says, I roll 4 dice, I would shift, which I'll explain later, and this will guaranteed deal damage. However, if I were to make both of these things into modifications, I would have to get rid of one of them because I can only have one of each modifying icon, right? So this gives you an ability to make the things that you bought earlier in the game still valuable without them being completely useless, and to tailor your own weapon. How does fighting work? Well, when you fight, you're going to roll dice. And how the dice work in the game is, earlier I mentioned if you scavenge, you would roll 2 dice. So let's say if we did this. Where this lands, this blue number is the strength of the result. The red is how much damage, okay? Let's just say for the sake of argument, I rolled this. 4 of these sides are blank, 2 are crits. A crit means that you get double the value. So if this was down here instead, I would have a 4 instead of a 2. However, if you ever roll dice outside of a fight, you take damage equal to the result of the damage. It's like your effort you're expending in order to do that action. If you're fighting against another player and they have dice, you compare the strength value. Whoever has the highest strength wins the fight. Ties go to the player, or the active player rather. Damage is dealt to each other. When you're fighting an NPC, NPCs don't like track their health or anything because you just encounter them and you fight. But NPCs have a thing called overwhelm. And overwhelm means if you hit the requisite damage amount, you get an extra bonus, right? So it's like you're procking a secondary bonus. You're beating the snot out of them and getting more for your trouble. And that's how the dice work. This weapon up here says shift 1 die after you roll. That means that you can pick up a die and you just move it, right? So let's just say for the sake of argument, this guy was going to deal me this damage and I don't like that it's a 3 and he's dealing me the damage. I'll move the die up there and now it does less. Or here, I would move this up here and now it's -1 strength and it doesn't deal damage. So you have the ability to manipulate. But the dice system is interesting because there's not like re-rolls. It's not like Yahtzee style where you roll a bunch of times. You do a big roll and then you try to affect the outcome. In this game, there's dice, but your cards allow you to leverage. So everyone has an Omni kit. That means you can play this. You just get to roll an extra die. This card here, this doesn't affect combat, but some of the other ones do. So this card here says shift 1 and shield 2 damage. So you can kind of tailor for turns. So if you need to win something, you can win. You're just not going to be able to do that all the time. You got to build up to that moment, which is cool. And you get your little combo and you do your thing. Ta-da, right? And if you take damage and your life would be reduced to 0, there's 6 cards over here, and these are called defeat cards. You'll just draw 1. Half of the cards just are injuries, and they just say you lose the rest of your turn and you go to the hospital. The special action at the hospital is no one can fight you there, and you spend an action and you get all your health back, all your vitality back. Some of them, however, are bad, like serious injury. If you draw that, you're laying on the ground, your life is reduced, you discard all your cards, and you do not get to go to the hospital. If you go to the hospital, yes, it's an action to refresh, but you still get the option to do that and reset. It's just a little bit of an action tax. 2 of the other cards are really good. One of them just lets you can win. You actually are lucky and you don't get knocked out. Another one, you escape, you run away, and you get a free move out of the way, and your life isn't reduced. So that's how that works. The last 2 things I'm going to talk about are your legend and your feats. How a legend works is anytime you gain legend, you just move on this track. And in the final version, there'll be die cut holes. If you land on a space with an ability, you get that ability. If you loop all the way around, back around, if you land on or pass, if you get all the way back around, you get 2 victory points. Okay? Over here, and this is like an internal engine. So this particular character, he really wants these boost tokens because he's trying to run around this whole planet and save the world. And that takes a lot of effort on his part to do so. So he needs to farm these boost tokens so he can do these impossible things, right? Like this guy could like literally go across the entire board. Each character starts with these feats, and these feats are going to have 4 generic starter feats. Well, they're not generic, they're tied to your character, but they're 4 basic feats, and then the specific feats based off of what your character does. Whenever I complete feats equal to my chapter, when I complete all my feats that are in front of me, I progress in my story. I'll read an entry. Down here, it'll tell me to read an entry from the storybook. I'll make a narrative decision. That narrative decision will impact the world. It will change the world. Your character, something will happen to your character, something will happen to the world. And you make interesting forks. So, for example, this character, Grash, she's a gladiator that's not lost a fight in hundreds of years. And she just wants to feel fear again. So she's come to the most dangerous place in the galaxy with the hope of feeling fear again and losing. She wants to lose a fight. She wants to find a worthy foe because she hasn't found one in so long. Her narrative path, and a little bit of a spoiler, is after she goes around and she kind of gets the lay of the land of this world, she's like, well, I'm hearing rumors that there's things here that I could fight. But she's also like, this place is kind of terrible, and it kind of needs someone to provide some law and order to this lawless place. And who better to rule this world than her, right? So you'll have that narrative fork, and you make that decision, and then specific feats will come out. So, for example, if she decides to go find a worthy foe, she kind of becomes like a kaiju hunter. If she decides to take over the planet, she's at war with the factions, and she has to go off and kill off a member of each of the factions in order to accomplish that. And there are consequences for doing that. She'll kill a person from a faction, and the faction will no longer work with her because of the choices that she's made. So there's a lot of sense of permanence. There's a lot of opportunity. And while the encounters and stuff provide tactics and kind of unexpected, unpredictable moments, you have a lot of ability to control the outcome of things in terms of planning, in terms of your internal engine that you're building for your character, etc. And that is Forsaken.
All right. Be sure to check that one out. If you're enjoying the content, please be sure to click on the subscribe button down below. Thanks for your time, YouTube.
This video is brought to you by all of my amazing Patreon supporters, and I would love it if you would join their ranks and have your name immortalized in the end of many of my videos for the end of time. But consider for only $1 a month, and as always, thanks for stopping by.